Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Erie County Controller Stefan Mychajliw, and we're basically talking about the status of Erie County's budget and the coronavirus lockdown. And there's another thing coming up, which is called an election and a primary, and that's even before coronavirus was on the scene. That was a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, it's been different. It's a different election cycle. I had to cancel 4 fundraisers. I love going out and meeting taxpayers and, actually, telling them my story, that I'm the son of Polish and Ukrainian immigrants that came to America the right way. My grandparents were farmers on the Ukrainian border and fled during World War II, and they came to the greatest country on earth to give me opportunities that they never had. And so normally I would be sharing that story about, my dad being a typewriter repairman, my mom was a factory worker, youngest of 7 kids, grew up on the east side of Buffalo, and just through God's grace, hard work and a great education, I've been able to live the American dream. But it's been a challenge to be able to share that story with people face to face, and so you just you try and figure out other ways to do that. And it's a Republican primary, June 23rd, for the 27th Congressional District. And I tell people all the time that I supported President Trump when it wasn't popular in 2016. I actually worked for the president at the Republican National Convention in 2016 with the likes of Michael Caputo and others, where it really hurt me politically. But I didn't care. President Trump is a great president, and he needs a true conservative that's been with him since day one in Congress, and I'm that guy.
Well, I got to say, because this is an election year, that we'll give equal time to any other candidate. I mean, Chris Jacobs and Beth Parlato, Nate McMurray, they're all going to be running in that 27th district, and this is equal time. So.
And I love to have a debate.
And you know what? That's another point. For WBBZ, I would love to have a debate. I think that the people should be able to see the candidates next to each other, even socially distant next to each other. Right. But I think that a good, transparent discussion about issues, because all too often it becomes a character or a popularity race, and it should be an issue race. It should be a position race. What are you going to do? Position on issues once you're in an elected office.
And right now, I accept. I'll debate anytime, anywhere, here in the studio with any amount of candidates. I'm proud of my record. I'm a consistent conservative. I've always been pro-life. I've always supported the Second Amendment. I have a concealed carry permit. I'm a member of the NRA. I've never told the New York Times that I supported abortion rights, ever. I wasn't William Weld's running mate, who was actually running against President Trump. I've never been part of the Albany swamp. I'm not an Albany moderate. I've never, ever supported money for Planned Parenthood. I've been a true conservative and a true supporter of President Trump. And Phil, I wholeheartedly accept that invitation to share my conservative record with all of your viewers and the people in New York 27.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of my friends are very liberal, and we have a lot of discussions, political discussions, and I come across as conservative, but I like to consider myself more common sense, because I will go in any particular direction on any subject, and most of the time when we have discussions and you get rid of the labels, when two people talk about an issue, interestingly and surprisingly, it's not that difficult to agree on what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, good people can disagree without being disagreeable.
Right.
And I think the one thing that drives taxpayers crazy is just hypocrisy. You are who you are.
Right.
I am a true conservative, a Trump supporter, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. So Phil, let's just say if I went to the Elmwood Village and I stood on a soapbox and said, all of a sudden, I support abortion rights and I love Nancy Pelosi, would anyone really believe that? No. Of course not. So, I've run in a dark blue district in Erie County, and I've won 3 elections just by being honest about who I am. I'm not pretending to be something that I'm not just because I'm running in an ultra-conservative district. You know, the voters know me that I have a conservative record, that I've delivered for them, you know, as county controller, and I'll do the same in Congress. But I am who I am. You know, you like it or not, I'm an ultra-conservative who supports President Trump, and I've never been this hypocritical chameleon that I'm going to blend in and pretend to be something that I'm not just because of the district that I'm running in.
Well, I think that the key is when you can understand where a person is coming from, and if they're genuine enough and they're consistent in what they believe in and what they say, they don't have to kind of make things up. So when you ask them a question today, you'll get an answer, and if you ask them that same question next year, it's going to say the same. And that was, you know, Ronald Reagan. For anything that anybody says about Ronald Reagan, he had real core beliefs. They didn't change over time. His beliefs were based on common sense and certain principles, so he didn't have to think about it whenever anybody asked him a question. He just, based on what he thought made sense, that's how he answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, some candidates, when they're running in a dark blue Democratic district, all of a sudden they so-called believe in liberal philosophies and policies. And then when they're running in a conservative district, all of a sudden, you know, they put the MAGA hat on and, hey, I love President Trump. But look, I had to run countywide in 2017 for re-election as Erie County Controller. And my first victory was in an Obama presidential year in 2012. I mean, I'd rather set myself on fire than run in a Democratic presidential year again. But I told people who I was. This is my record. I'm the son of immigrants. They came here the right way. I'm conservative just like you. I'm pro-life. I support the Second Amendment. And like it or not, that's who I am. Please vote for me. And they did in 2012. And I had that re-elect in 2017 where it was not popular to support President Trump in 2016. I mean, a lot of Republicans and so-called Trump supporters now saw President Trump then as toxic. And I didn't buy that at all. And I put my money where my mouth is. I went to Cleveland and worked for President Trump at the Republican National Convention. I traveled to different cities. I even traveled to Erie, Pennsylvania, being a Trump surrogate and talking about his candidacy on television. So that's who, you know who your friends are. They say in politics, if you want a friend in politics, get a dog. You find out who your friends are in a foxhole. And I think that's what I tell voters all the time. Who supported President Trump when it wasn't popular? I did. You know, I've always been a conservative, and I've never been afraid of it. And I think that's what people want in their leaders, whether you're a liberal, a conservative, an independent, or a Republican. Just don't be a hypocrite and be who you are.
Right.
And I think good people can disagree without being disagreeable. And it's really sad in politics now how toxic it is that if you support Bernie Sanders or you support President Trump, that people can just get so damn angry and mad now. I don't understand that. In the Republican primary for Congress, New York 27, the primary is June 23rd, a lot of you are watching television and you're receiving your mail, and there's a lot of attack ads out there. Other candidates are just ripping each other apart. And in this day and age right now, it's not the right time to do that. People are concerned about living and dying. You're concerned about losing your job and paying your mortgage. I'm going to run a positive campaign. I'm going to tell people exactly who I am, that I'm the son of immigrants, that, again, my dad was a typewriter repairman. My mom worked in a factory to pay our bills. And then I'll never forget the people that voted for me in Congress. And I'm just going to run a positive campaign, letting people know about my conservative values. And other candidates in the race, and they're just ripping each other apart. And I'm not going to get in the mud like that. I'm not.
Well, I don't mind, and we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'll change direction a little bit. I don't mind talking about bad things that have been done in office by different politicians or officials, and I'll give you one example. And the example that I want to use is a decision was made at the top level in New York State. You know, Governor Cuomo made a decision to put, at least to my knowledge, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but he made a decision that retirement homes had to take coronavirus infected people into their homes. And I think that the reasoning was he didn't want to overburden the hospitals. So he had patients transferred to the retirement homes. And as a consequence, a vast majority of the deaths in the state occurred in the retirement homes because those were the vulnerable people.
Sick and disturbing. I mean, it also goes along the lines of all of those deaths were the cause of a government decision to put people with coronavirus in nursing homes, amongst the most vulnerable.
It seems counterintuitive.
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, but even look at some of the decisions that government's making, like Governor Cuomo, spending $69 million to purchase ventilators from a vendor who's never sold ventilators before. The money's out the door, and we haven't gotten a single ventilator back from New York State. So I asked the state comptroller to investigate, and they are. But as far as nursing home deaths are concerned, I mean, the decisions made in government, they impact people. They impact people's lives. And by Governor Cuomo ordering people with coronavirus back into nursing homes, that is directly responsible for the deaths of many people in nursing homes who didn't deserve to die.
And then you would have thought that that would be common sense. I mean, you would know that if you took an infected person and put it into a vulnerable population by order, I mean, by order in your authority, that you were condemning people to death. And if you were in any other position, that would be a criminal offense. I mean, I know he's the governor, and I know that, you know, that's not the way people think, but anybody else in any other position, in any other situation, they'd be charged with a crime.
And look at the health and safety of taxpayers alone. You know, you mentioned 9/11 before. One of the reasons why these criminals were allowed, these awful terrorists were able to execute so many Americans, is because of the fact that law enforcement did not share information. They worked in silos. So you mentioned Governor Cuomo. In the budget, under the cloak of COVID-19, they snuck in a provision in the budget that said it's a felony for police officers to share information about illegal immigrants with another member of law enforcement. So now in New York State, it's a felony if a police officer pulls over a suspected illegal immigrant and then reports that information to ICE or another police agency. So here, our government is working against us in passing these crazy laws that make no sense whatsoever, that's literally harming our seniors and taxpayers across New York State.
Well, you know, the one thing I tell my kids is when they behave themselves, they should behave themselves in a way that makes sense, common sense. You know, if they do that, then they'll stay out of trouble. And I want them to stay out of trouble. And I would expect government to behave at least as well as my kids.
You would think.
You would. That's, you know, maybe I'm hoping for too much.
But I mean, how do you, with a clear conscience, say, okay, and I understand the thought process behind it, we don't want to jam up hospitals, but why would you send a senior or anyone with coronavirus back into a nursing home where you have the most vulnerable of our population? It's
Yeah,
literally led to
I
the
know.
deaths of innocent people.
It's one of those head-scratching decisions. That's a whole new program, I guess. And you know what? We have to do this again. This is a
Anytime.
good conversation, and we can go on forever. And unfortunately, we just don't have that much time. But we will come back and have these discussions again. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I hope it's food for thought. I want to thank Stefan for being my guest on this big picture. And hopefully you enjoy this programming on WBBZ. I want to thank you for watching The Big Picture. I want to thank you for watching WBBZ. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time.